Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Canada Immigration Live Q&A. This is Mark Holthe with my faithful co-pilot, Alicia Backman-Bahari. How are you, Alicia?
I'm doing all right, Mark. I'm trying to stay warm. I don't know anybody else in Alberta, but it is cold. I went for a walk with the dogs yesterday. I should have almost given you the picture to put up. I had like my parka, I had the ski goggles, I had the buff, I had the dogs in like the booties and the coats. It was ridiculous. So it is really cold.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, we're a little bit late getting started here. People are probably wondering if we were going to go live today, and we've got some people who are giving a few shout outs too. Good morning to you too, Yogesh. If this is your first time, and if you're coming back, if you're a former client, if you're just a friend of the channel, make sure you give us a shout out. We'd love to see where people are tuning in from. Over the last while, we definitely have seen a significant shift to the individuals that are viewing the channel to those that are in Canada. And with our Time's Up series, Alicia and I just finished recording an episode on bridging open work permits, which is very timely, just like the episode Igor and I did last Friday. If you have not watched it, please head over to the YouTube channel and watch it, because there are some massive landmines that exist within the post-grad work permit / spousal open work permit world. So I'm just going to stretch this out here. This is just the YouTube channel here. But if you go to this episode here, it's got just about 6,000 views, but anyone who is considering applying for a postgrad work permit, so shifting from a study permit to a postgrad and a spousal open work permit at the same time, absolutely needs to watch this video, because we have seen some nasty practices on behalf of IRCC and its officers in selectively refusing applications in such a way that people lose the ability to work, and in many cases forces them to say time's up in Canada and return home. So we're seeing a ton of consultations regarding that. So please connect in and watch that. If you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do it, or wherever you're watching this live stream. Make sure that you connect in so that you're notified when we go live, because sometimes we don't give a lot of advance notice. And we find that a lot of our clients, if they are, or even our followers on our YouTube channel, if they have subscribed to the channel, they're more likely to see when we do have those lives. So we will get to questions as we go forward. I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now in immigration, a lot of uncertainty in people's lives. Marlon's tuning in from Ottawa. I don't know if it's a little bit nicer weather out in Ottawa, our nation's capital, Marlon. Hopefully it is. And Merlin says, shout out from new silent viewer. Well, we will give you some applause. Welcome here. Anne says, hey, Mark and Alicia, where's the bridging open work permit video? We just recorded it. But I do want to point out right here that Alicia wrote an awesome blog post right here that's on our website. We have got some massive problems with our website. So our Holthe Immigration Law website here, we shifted it to a different format. And when we shifted it to the different format, it caused huge problems with our searchability within Google. So we've retained a firm to help us fix this. But for those of you who are looking for additional information, and in particular, Alicia's blog post that she just wrote, you can go to our website, click on blogs, go to our blog, and Alicia's blog post is right here. And it's entitled Bridging Open Work Permits versus Bridging Closed Work Permits. Picking the wrong one can mean work permit refusal. So we went through in detail, and this was just dropped just probably a few days ago, about 5 days ago. And this is the next episode in our Time's Up series, which leads me to one other thing. If you go to our site and you go to our resources, you will see that our podcast is here. So if you guys are commuting back and forth to work, most people are now, if work is in a physical location, you are traveling and commuting back and forth. We encourage you to subscribe on podcast or Spotify. But in our Time's Up series, this one here is the very initial one, episode 150, the high cost of staying in Canada illegally. That kicked it all off. We recommend you start with that. and then binge all of them. Start from 150 and work your way forward. We just recorded 157, which is on bridging open work permits. But we've got just a whole host of different topics. No points for LMIAs, when not to claim refugee status, H&C applications, what you need to know, no extensions for postgrads, how to move to Canada for U.S. citizens. That's following the Trump. That one wasn't a Time's Up series, but it was one that was just timely. And then you can see here, my work permit expires soon. And then the high cost of staying in Canada. And so this one here, 151, I also want to, kind of highlight just the reality. Actually, it's actually 149. Sorry, it was the one that starts what to do when your work permit is expiring. And then the high cost of staying in Canada illegally is one that I think really can help people make good decisions and understand why compliance is better than choosing the alternative. So I wanted to highlight those all right at the beginning because a lot of people just are not aware that we have the Canadian Immigration Podcast. And often those Time's Up series are also included within our actual, our YouTube channel. So you can watch them all here. Okay. All right. So now that we've covered that off, we've got a few more little shout outs here to give. Let's see who we got here. We've got Jacobs something. Hello to you. Let's see here what
There's
else
a nice
we
note
have.
from Alexa too, if you look at the very beginning, Mark.
What's up? Do we miss one?
There's a nice note from Alexa at the very beginning.
Oh, let's see here. Oh, Alexa. Okay. Alexa says, "Hi, Mark. I chanced upon your YouTube when I searched about TR to PR back in 2021. I watched all your live videos and got my PR. Last February the 3rd, I took my oath and became a Canadian citizen. Thank you." Wow, that is awesome. That is so exciting. Oh, thanks, Alexa. That's great. I love when people reconnect and keep us up to date and appraised as to what's happening with their lives. And boy, there's so much negativity right now. It's wonderful to get some positive news. So pleased that we could play a small part in your journey. All right. Congratulations, Alexa. And she says, "Please don't get tired sharing your knowledge and helping hopeful immigrants. You, Alicia, and everyone are amazing. Thank you so much. That really, really means a lot." Grace is viewing from freezing Edmonton. Okay, so there we go. We've got Lethbridge is darn cold. Calgary's just as cold. And Edmonton's probably even colder. So great to have you here. We've got Rafiuzamon from Bangladesh. Hey, there we go. You are in the minority, my friend, for people watching the channel. All right. Okay, I think we've pretty much hit on most of the shout outs here for people that are connecting in. We've got Brian, who is up in Calgary as well. Great to have you here, Brian. Lorena is in beautiful BC. I think you've had a little bit of that white stuff out in BC, depending on where you're at. There's been a little bit of snow all the way into Vancouver, I think, hasn't there? And then Merlin, the silent viewer, new subscriber. That's great. Making sure that I'm not missing anything. Dijin says, "Hope you're staying warm in the snowy weather." Yes, I've got my big, heavy parka out that I crack open when it's really cold. I actually shoveled my walk this morning, and yes, it was a little nippy, definitely nippy. Let's see here. We've got Nima in Drumheller. Hey, I've got a good friend, Justin, who is in Drumheller. So if you see Justin Boland, give him a hello for me. So he's in Drumheller, a good friend from my university days. And I think, okay, that's good. All right. Well, before we get to the questions, we absolutely have to hit on what's been happening in immigration. And obviously, we know that there was another round of invitation. It was a PNP only in February. So just yesterday, it was there were only 455 invitations issued, Alicia. And I think this is going to be very telling going forward, because usually we're 700, 800 plus, sometimes over 1,000 when they do a round of invitations. But there are only 455, and when there's fewer, the scores tend to be a little bit higher. And I think we're also going to see that the PNP candidates who are getting nominated are often going to have higher human capital than they have in the past. And so not surprising that it's 800 and 455 was the number issued. So we've got that. And then if we go back here, actually, let's take a look at just let me go back here. want to make sure I'm hitting the right spot here. Okay. So the latest round, previous rounds of invitation. Boy, this is making it a little
Just
bit more difficult for me.
click the green
Oh,
button there,
there
Mark.
it
There you
is. They've changed things on me. So here's our previous rounds. We can see that about a little over a week ago, there was the big CEC and 4,000 invitations. We had a number of clients that received ITAs. But are you surprised, Alicia, to see the score still so high at 527 when they, did 4,000?
Not really. It's tough slogging out there right now. I have had a number of consults actually from American clients who were thinking about, can I come to Canada? And most of them are professionals or they've been working for over 10 years and they have master's degrees. And if you're working and you're over, 35 and you have a master's degree or even a PhD and you're an American, so you've got really strong language scores for English, your CRS is probably in the mid 400s. Like that is it.
Mhm.
And so it is super tough to get to that 500 mark, let alone, like a 520 or a 540. So
Yeah.
things are super competitive right now. And I think it will stay that way for some time until there are regular draws and we start to get this change. We'll have to see when immigration actually takes away those 50 points for job offer points. They haven't done so yet. Um, I did see, Mark,
Mhm.
they kind of send out a notice when they're going to do a program change and they have the portal offline for a number of hours. That's happening on February 11th. So I'm a little bit worried that there's going to be
Mhm.
some major change that's announced, but we're
Yeah.
still waiting to see that. Once they implement that 50-point reduction in job offer points, it
Yeah.
will depress those CRS points a little bit, but it hasn't happened yet.
You bet. And what Alicia is talking about is essentially the notification that IRCC sent out to inform everyone that they were going to be removing those extra 50 points or 200 points available for people that had an arranged offer of employment, which essentially meant an LMIA based work permit or otherwise qualify through the third option, which was working under a closed work permit under the International Mobility Program. And so we know that Minister Miller, and why don't we bring him on here? Sorry, you're blocking out Alicia, Minister. We're going to slide you over here. So Minister Miller had indicated that because of the fraud within the program, and that's the large dominating reason he's indicated because of fraud within the LMIA process, selling of job offers, buying of job offers, that whole corruption that exists with fake, companies, fake jobs, um, all of that has resulted in the minister saying we're going to remove those points from job offers. And right now, it could happen any day. It always troubles me when they say that they're going to do something and then we never know when it's actually going to roll out. But that's the minister. He's confirmed this is what's going to happen, all in an effort to combat the illegal trade essentially in job offers, real or fake. I remember, Alicia, I had a consult with one client that indicated they'd paid, I think it was $70,000 for their job offer before they came to me. And ultimately, it's hard because there's not much that I can do for people like that. In fact, I have a consult I know coming up with an employer and an employee, and it's tough because I had a previous consult and I didn't think they were going to reach out to me again because I'm not sure what I can do because they've continued to employ the person illegally. And
Oh
so what do
no.
you do when you've employed the person illegally when their work permit's expired? Just because you've submitted an LMIA application, if their permit is expired, they can't just return to work. And you can't just pretend that it didn't happen, which is kind of what they were hinting at. So we're going to have a very difficult conversation today when I basically tell them, well, look, I can't assist you. Ultimately, anything that's going to be submitted, you're going to have to disclose you've worked without authorization. And Alicia, gone are the days when Minister Miller here and his staff and his department are going to show mercy to anyone who has been non-compliant with any provision of the act. So, yeah, it's hard because we can only advise people to be honest, tell the truth, disclose when they have not complied. Any 5710 form when you're applying to extend your work permit asks if you'd worked without status or studied or and if you say no, well then that's misrepresentation. So It's
Well, and
tough.
not only that, Mark, but it's like this is a serious offense for the employer. And so if you look at the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, Section 25, like you're actually liable, and companies are liable, and there's other like offenses relating to punishment and what the maximum charges are. But there's a deemed provision. So under 124 of the Act, every person who contravenes this act, you know, or employs, so 124 sub 1 sub C says employs a foreign national in
Oh,
a
sorry. We're
capacity
into
in
the
which the
act,
foreign
Alicia, or the
national,
regs. Sorry.
it's in the act, sorry.
Sorry. I got the wrong.
Yeah.
There we go.
So if this company is employing a foreign national, so 124 sub 1 sub C
Mhm.
employs a foreign national in a capacity in which the foreign national is not authorized under this act to be employed, that is an offense. And
Yeah.
if you look at sub 2, it's a deemed
Yeah.
knowledge offense. So the employer can't just say, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So they have to exercise due diligence to determine whether somebody is authorized. And then there are serious penalties. If you look at 125, the penalty is, a conviction on a summary conviction, it's a $50,000 fine. If
Mhm.
it could still be a higher fine and imprisonment. So if you look at the penalty provisions under the next section, Section 125, it actually talks about what the penalties are. I'm not sure why.
It's fighting me here, Alicia. It
The
doesn't want
loss.
to show me 125. Here we go.
Yeah,
There it
there
is.
you go. There's the penalty provisions. So you could have, you know, fines of $50,000 and or jail time as the employer.
Yeah. And I want to also point out here, like, this is the thing that irritates me because counseling misrepresentation is already built within the act. So
Hmm.
if an individual who, whether they are being advised to do so by their employer, by their immigration consultant, heaven forbid their lawyer, anyone who counsels, induces, aids, or abets, or attempts to counsel, induce, aid, or abet any person to directly or indirectly misrepresent or withhold material facts relating to a relevant matter, which working without authorization is definitely a relevant matter, um, or could induce an error in the administration of this act is guilty of an offense. So
Hmm.
yeah, so these provisions are, just like there's imprisonment is technically a part of this.
Hmm.
So I've never seen anyone actually, I don't think I've seen anyone go to jail or be sentenced. I'm sure maybe there is out there, for this provision, like there's individuals that are guilty of significant fraud and, within the temporary foreign worker program and abuse and things like that, that's of a criminal nature. But regardless, these provisions are here. And so it's all about enforcement, and the government is in full enforcement mode. They really are. I wonder as things, so obviously, if we just slide back here, Alicia, we know that, with the scores, if we look at the distribution, I was going to hit on this as well. You can see here that this 600 plus is basically P&P plus, although currently people are going to have 200 points some for job offers, which could fit under here. But you can see 468. So that was the total number of applicants in the pool when the PNP nomination came. So if you look at that, 468, and then there were 455 number of invitations issued, which suggests that, there 455 of the 468 were PNPs, and then there are a few people that had, I'm assuming, the 200. They would have to reach over, to reach over 600. I guess technically, yeah, they would be the individuals with 200-point job offers. Can you hit 600 without that? Like you've got French. I'm just wondering. It'd be pretty hard, I think, to hit 600.
Maybe if you had
Um,
a PhD and French.
Maybe it'd be close. It'd be close. But regardless, you can see the numbers. And so this is pretty accurate. So then we know, individuals in here were drawn. So we know from 501 to 600. And I wish they would break this down now, Alicia, like they
Hmm.
do for the 450s to the 490s. I've said this in the past when Express Entry was first launched, they only broke down the 401s to 450s. But then because all the scores kept going up, they then, broke it down here. And now we can see from 451 to 500 in this range. we have 68,000. And then from the 500 to 600 range, we have 22,000 people. So it is, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I think most of the people that are in this 500 to 600 are in the 500 to 550 range, just because of the way the CRS scores kind of rest. But this is, yeah, we know that going forward, things are going to be a lot tougher. Now, I want to point out one other thing when it comes to the types of rounds of invitations. You can see here, find out how category-based rounds work. If we click on here, Alicia, you'll see that they still have STEM and transport and ag on this list, although we know from the annual levels plans that these are no longer categories. Essentially, French is God's gift to immigration, or liberals' gift to immigration, because everything, like Alicia, I was in a local immigration partnership meeting yesterday, and every group in Lethbridge had cuts in their funding. Our Lethbridge Polytechnic had the funding cut for their English language training. So all of the English language ESL classes that they had at the college, which were large, it will be canceled within the next month because they don't have funding. And a number of other programs are also settlement as well. Settlement services for Ukraine nationals will no longer be available. That's being pulled. But guess what got an 18% boost in their settlement fund, in their funds? It's the Francophone agencies and the
Well,
Francophone community. And so there's
and
a heavy emphasis on French.
I guess, Mark, that leads us to the fact that they now have posted on their website the details about the rural community immigration pilot and then the Francophone community immigration class as well. So these are now also posted on the website. So this is maybe an option if you are looking to immigrate and you're looking to a rural community. So we have the news release. It was released last week. And then if you scroll down to the very bottom, it actually gives you a link. It tells you which cities are going to be on this list. The only one in Alberta for the rural is going to be Claresholm, which used to be under the RNIP.
Made the
So
cut
that's good.
again.
They're maintaining it. Yeah. But if you are Francophone, then there's other options. So Acadian Peninsula, New Brunswick, Sudbury, Timmins, Superior East Region in Ontario, and then there's one in Manitoba and just BC and Kelowna in BC. And then if you click on see our website, they literally have actually rolled out all the program, who can apply and how to apply for it. And so this is nice because it gives more details than what we had before in just the Canada Gazette, which only had the ministerial instructions. Now it actually has the IRCC page. The tricky thing with this, well, I guess the good thing with this is that if you do qualify, you have to have a job offer from an employer that's been vetted in one of these communities, and then you have to get that community support letter. And if you've been able to get those two things and submit your PR application, there's a way to apply for a work permit, which is great. So people can apply for a work permit while they wait for their PR to be processed. So these programs, if you happen to speak French or if you are willing to move to one of these more rural communities and you can get that one of the designated employers, so it can't just be any employer, it has to be one that's been designated by the municipality, and then to get that community support letter, then maybe you have an option other than Express Entry. And if you look at this, it's very, very similar to Express Entry in terms of having valid job offer, work experience, at least 1 year, 1,560 hours, and making sure that you've got your language test results and your education credential assessments and making sure you've got settlement funds.
Yes. All right. So those are just a few little updates on the world of immigration, and things are definitely they're definitely tight. And we have consultations all the time with individuals helping to strategize the best options moving forward. We've had lots of discussions with employers trying to determine how best to support their workers. And there's a lot of employers that want to support workers. One piece of advice I'll give individuals, if they're currently working for an employer on an open work permit and they know that that employer is not going to support them, there's no point staying with them unless you're just planning to go home. You absolutely need the support of your employer. And often people say, well, where should I go? What should I do? One couple I had a consult with here in Alberta, they're in Calgary, and we know the new rules and the bars to applying for an LMIA for low wage occupations are quite severe, and they're very blanket. In other words, if there's 6% or higher unemployment in a region, then the employer who is employing someone at a wage in Alberta that's lower than, I think it's $35.40, they're considered low wage, and flat out, you just can't apply. And if an employer has more than 10% of their workforce on temporary foreign worker LMIA based work permits, they also are barred from applying for future ones. So there's a lot of people. This is the way the Liberal government has really blocked off options for people to be able to extend. And so when people are in this situation, especially if they're in Calgary in one of these jobs, or Edmonton, for instance, which are both unemployment rates higher than 6%. I think Alberta is almost 7.5 or 7.3 or something now. But anyways, if the unemployment rates are that way, then you have to start looking at, rural. And it's not just Alberta, it's other places. And so we've been talking about this. I've been talking about this for years. The need to go rural and look for opportunities outside of the major centers. So a couple said to me, well, where should we go? And I said, the one guy says, well, I've been looking, and Medicine Hat's pretty good. It has a Costco. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. Well, what kind of jobs? Well, it was a food service job. And I said, one thing we do know is that food service is definitely not high on the priority list for provinces, but it's definitely outside of Calgary. So Medicine Hat's unemployment rate is under 6%. So it is possible for an employer to be able to apply for an LMIA if truly the need is there and they can show there's no permanent residents or Canadians available to do the job. And so for this couple, I said, look, at the end of the day, you have to do what you've got to do. And for most people, it's a battle of attrition. It's being able to find a way to be able to stay legally and continue to work on a valid work permit so that you can weather the storm while so many other people are going to have to go home because they can't extend their work permits. And as those numbers of people returning home increase, it is going to soften the pressure on these permanent resident spots. So I said to him, look, that's fine. You might like the community and there might be a Costco there. But more importantly is to ask the employer if they are, willing to support your permanent residence. But here's the thing. If you're applying for a new job, and I know we're kind of straying off into other areas, but if you're applying for a new job, asking right up front, hey, will you support permanent residence, can be a turnoff for some employers. Because at the end of the day, they don't know you. They don't know if you're going to be a fit. You're probably going to be under a probationary, contract for a few months till they figure out if you're a good fit for the company. But here's something that I always will have you and encourage you to ask. And it's a simple question. Do you have a policy of not supporting permanent residents? And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking that question, because if an employer, like many of our institutional employers, often do have policies like that where they're not going to support PR other than giving a reference letter. If you're going to work for an employer like that, it doesn't matter how awesome the job is. You are not going to have a pathway to permanent residence, in particular in Alberta, but very much so in the other provinces as well. So that's what I advise people. Ask around, like if you're going to, you have a job that looks promising and you're in the second stage interview or whatever it might be, and you're trying to make a decision whether or not to take the position, you need to ask their HR or whoever you're speaking to if they have a policy of not supporting PR. And if they do, then don't pursue it. And so that was the advice that I had for this couple. You need to look around, and they literally got in the vehicle and drove around. They drove to Medicine Hat, checked it out, asked around, and obviously a lot of experience in food service. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take a job, because a food service supervisor position in Medicine Hat is light years better than a food service supervisor position in Calgary because of the availability of an LMIA, if it's possible. And it's only because of the restrictions. It's great to work for an employer in Calgary, but if they have no ability to extend your work permit, and you have no pathway to PR because the provinces now have half as many allocations as they did previously. At least we understand most of them are that way, Alicia. I don't know what the situation is in Ontario. Maybe they've been taking their fair share of refugees. I don't know. The minister makes those calls, but he has hinted that if provinces change, how they're, willing to accept refugees, federal refugees, that somehow that might result in increased allocation of of nominations, which I think is a pretty crappy way of administering the program. I think it's a bully kind of approach. But that's what our minister has indicated. And if he feels like provinces are not doing what he wants them to do, well, he makes the call. And so we'll see how that affects our economic immigrants here in Alberta and across the country. But yeah, that's kind of, I know I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent here, but all of these things are really, really important to address because they affect directly the options that are available for people. Okay, let's jump in and let's try to get to as many questions as we can now. We'll hit the supers first. And remember, when you're asking questions, it's really important that you not ask a question that's specific. How do I, or what should I, or can I travel, or which application is best for me, or how do I immigrate? So those questions are really ones where I will ring the triangle. And what does that mean, Alicia?
It means please reach out, book a consult, because this is just a forum to give you immigration information. Mark and I are both immigration lawyers, but we cannot give you legal advice in a couple lines on a chat. We definitely need to make sure that we are professional in making sure that we understand all the complexity of your situation. And so we therefore need to have a one-on-one consult with you to understand really what's going on. And that's where we can give you advice.
You bet. Okay, with that being said, let's pull up Norton. Norton says, my PR is in process. I applied for a bridging open work permit before expiry of my postgrad work permit and got the work permit extension letter. But my nomination was employer restricted. So closed work permit, T13 work permit application is needed instead of bridging open work permit. Can I submit closed work permit application now? I'm ringing this bell, Norton. So they applied and he indicated he got the letter, which is basically you're valid to work for, whatever, 120 days, whatever it is. This is a challenge. He says before my bridging work permit, my postgrad work permit was expired, but I don't know if it's expired now. Yeah, this is one.
Yeah, Norton, this is
Oh,
a really dicey situation. So go read the
oh,
blog article that I wrote, but this has got bad news written all over it.
yeah.
And so, how long ago did your postgrad work permit expire? Did you submit an application with an R204C support letter from the province? Did you have your employer do the employer portal? Did you get an A number from them? Did you prove that you're eligible to do the job? Everything can fall down like a house of cards if you
Yeah.
don't do that work permit application correctly, which
Uh,
is exactly why I wrote the blog article and we just did a podcast on it. But please, please reach out to book a consult because this is not a good situation.
Yeah. Oh, that is so tough, Norton. Yeah, I strongly encourage you to book a consult. And like we said, just click on there's links below in the description and speak to a lawyer, connect, whatever it is. Please, please do that. Oh, my heart goes out to you, Norton. This is the kind of thing, you guys, that Alicia and I, we just really struggle with. We do our very best. I think there's not a firm out there, I don't think, a law firm that does as much as we do to try to teach and educate and share free information with people. I know Stephen Murins does a ton, and Tamara Mushakusher does a lot of posting. But in terms of actual strategy, how to do things, how to avoid problems and mistakes, I'll hold us out there ahead of everyone out there. And the worst thing for us is when we've written a blog post or we've done a video on a certain topic, and then we have a consult with someone who's reached out to us too late. And so it's hard. The world says DIY is the way to go. There's lots of resources online. There's lots of groups. There's, Reddit. There's everything else that's available for you. And, you don't need to hire anyone to help you. And generally speaking, immigration should be designed for people to be able to get things right and to be able to follow the instructions and to be able to fill out forms properly. But it has become, over the last 22, 23 years, I guess, since the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act was first created, it was established to clear up the nightmare that the Immigration Act was, with all of its exceptions and, just constant revisions. It was a mess. And we're now at that stage again with the IRPA, where it needs to be reformed. And I honestly thought, Alicia, they had discussions about that 2 or 3 years ago, but I guess there's such Things are such a mess right now, that's kind of further down the path. But the reality is, for the average person, immigration is extremely complicated. And the landmines that exist are just innumerable. And the consequences of stepping on one of those landmines in the context of filing an application is often an end to your story, an application that's refused. And now more than ever before, Alicia, myself, and Igor are seeing and discussing with people situations that are irredeemable. We just we can't fix them. And we just hope that people will reach out to us in advance, have a consult. We can give them advice and direction. And then if they choose to go forward, that's totally fine. At least they have information that they can trust. But consult after consult, individuals who've read some website or misunderstood what someone was saying or listened to someone who was just wrong to their detriment it's heartbreaking. So yes, so Norton, recommend that you book a consult and see if there is something that can happen. I don't know if your current work permit is already expired or what the options are, but yeah, I strongly encourage you to do that. Okay, then we have Brian here, Pedraza. He says, thank you, Mark and Alicia. If one cannot get a PCC from the US before the 60 days to apply for PR, what can one do? So let's go, Alicia, and I'll just show people how to find it. I go right here to the completeness. I've searched it so much that it just pops up. But it's basically, you can search completeness check, EE, IRCC, PDI, whatever. And then this is the site here. And in here, there's other sites that also talk about police clearance certificates, but I'll just pull it up here because generally speaking, this also contains the basic information that you need. But when you're going through this situation, so sometimes it happens, you get, like Brian, we'll just pull his comment up here again, see if we can get it to fit. Yeah. So like Brian says, I don't know when you've submitted your request, but it is taking longer for FBI results to come back, even with Chandler's. But he says one cannot get a PCC from the US before the 60 days to apply. What do you do? So we don't need to look at, what are required or things like that. We know he needs one. But as you scroll down here, you can see, and there's a reason this is in bold. Okay, there's a reason. Alicia's kind of smiling here, but IRCC may accept both of the following. So you can see here, officers can express discretion when assessing whether police certificates that do not fall within standard IRCC parameters may still be required to process the application. Officers have discretion in their determination whether or not a client is admissible by using other documents or mechanisms that are available to them. But understand, I don't know an officer who will not want to see the exact police clearance certificate that IRCC is asking for. So you can see here, if an individual does not yet have it in place by the time they have to file their ITA, it's a mandatory document. In exceptional circumstances, IRCC may accept the following, but you can see both of the following. So proof of having requested a police certificate for some countries, which is what you would have done, and an explanation of what best efforts. So to show that you have made the request, not a guarantee of acceptance, which they highlight. So exceptional circumstances, not a guarantee of acceptance here. And then in this explanation, the applicant should explain the delay in a document and upload the document in the country-specific field. So your explanation or letter of explanation. And it must show that the applicant, and this is, I want to emphasize, this should also be bolded personally. It must show that the applicant requested the police certificate as soon as possible after receiving their ITA. So you can't sit back and say, well, I just realized I need my police clearance certificate for the US, and I requested it 2 days before my ITA expired. So, you do the best that you can in these circumstances. But ultimately, what constitutes best efforts, and if it's enough to satisfy these, or meet the standard of an exceptional circumstance, that is to be seen. It really is. So I don't know, Alicia, if you have anything more to add to Brian other than, oh boy, you really want to try to do everything in your power to get that and include it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a matter of going to a different jurisdiction. Like I've had clients who are like, okay, well, if I go down to this processing post or this embassy, I might be able to expedite it. Hopefully you did like digital fingerprinting rather than the paper based fingerprinting, because the digital is much, much faster. Um, make sure that you prove that you submitted that application. Usually you can follow up to make sure that that is in process. Sometimes if people physically go back to the US, they're able to get it faster, but you're definitely going to want to show that you've made best efforts and prove that.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm just looking here. I see that we do have a super from Bedri, but I don't see a question, Bedri. So there's a this is what we have, and we
Oh,
welcome all thanks that you guys
I
provide to us.
I
Did you see?
see something saying July, dear Mark, July 2023 started 40 hours per week, single employer, does
Okay,
the
let me
second
pull it
year
up here.
anniversary.
Let's see if we can
Yeah,
find
so he's
it
trying to
here. Oh,
figure
there it
out
is.
what
Okay,
are
here
his
we go.
years.
There we go. Okay. So, dear Mark, July 2023 started 40 hours per week, single employer. Does second year anniversary July 2025 or 1560 hours April 2025? So, do you want to tackle this, because this once again comes down to what constitutes work experience and the temporal nature as well as the duration.
And so, Bedri, it's not until you actually hit July 2025, and you've got to be able to show that within those 52 weeks, you worked at least 30 hours per week. So you cannot carry over those extra 10 hours and say, oh, I got to my 1,560 hours sooner. So they will max it out at 30 hours per any given week. So for those first 52 weeks for the first year, it's going to take you to July 2024, and then you've got to go all the way to July 2025 before you can say, over those 52 weeks, I worked at least 30 hours per week. And then the other thing that I caution people about as well is sometimes people take an extended holiday, and sometimes they go back to their home country. And so let's say you went back to your home country for a month and maybe you took an unpaid leave of absence. You would have to deduct that from your 52 weeks. So if you took 4 weeks of an unpaid leave of absence, you've got to deduct that, and then you have to tack it on the back end. So make sure that you work at least until August of 2025 if you had time outside of the country or unpaid time during that period of employment. All right. And Mark's disappeared, but he's brought up another question, so I guess I will read the question from
Here,
Yogesh
I'll pull
Singh.
it up. Sorry, Alicia.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll pull it up here. So this is from Yogesh. And so Yogesh has a question here that we often see in the context of people trying to get police clearance certificates for the UAE. And we'll try to break this down. So Yogesh says, hey, please help me figure out my situation. Here's what happened. Work permit expired and had to come back to India. But before coming back, I had some debt. And then he talks about the debt. And let's just see here if we can pull this up. I just looked at it. Just a second here. Sorry. Okay. So before coming back, I had debt about 10 to 5,000 in credit cards and 12,000 when the bank took my car. They said I now owe them 12,000 now. In case I get invited to express entry, will this affect my file? So Alicia, maybe you can talk a little bit about inadmissibilities in Canada and the distinction between a criminal liability and a civil liability.
Mhm. And so, Yogesh, it's important that you are not inadmissible to Canada. And it depends on what happened in terms of how they're coming after you. This all sounds like consumer debt, and they're repossessing your vehicle in order to try to, your creditors are trying to get back some of the money that you owe them. The bad thing about this is whether you have to prove settlement funds. And so if you are looking at trying to get your application for express entry under federal skilled worker and you have to prove your settlement funds, this for sure can affect your express entry application, because it's showing that you probably do not have the settlement funds that you require, because you have to prove that you have accessible money over and above your debt and liabilities. And so if there's so much debt that they're repossessing your property, your vehicle, and you still have consumer debt, that is going to be a really tough thing to try to prove that you have settlement funds under FSW. If you happen to have that 1 year of high-skilled Canadian work experience and you meet eligibility for CEC and you're drawn under a CEC invitation to apply, the good news is technically you don't have to prove settlement funds, but there is also a section under the Act of financial inadmissibility, and that is something that sometimes rears its head if they think that you would not be able to support yourself, then you might have to go on social assistance. So there's a few things that could trip you up. As long as that is not a criminal debt, they've not charged you with a crime, it shouldn't be criminal inadmissibility, but definitely if you have to prove settlement funds, this could be something that is going to be problematic.
All right, let's jump to a few more here. Okay, Jan Carlos says, "Hey, Mark and Alicia, any idea why it's taking so long to receive final decision on CEC PR? I applied on my application, is way longer out of the processing time, but nothing yet." Hey, we're seeing all kinds of different things. Now, CEC is supposed to be 6 months, and if I go to the processing times, I don't know what actually your processing like your when you submitted your application. But if we look at the processing times right now for CEC, we go to economic immigration, we go to Canadian experience class, and then we can see right here 5 months is what they're posting. So I'm not sure what you mean by longer, if it's beyond that period of time, that 5 months. But essentially, if it is getting if it's surpassed that time period, I always request an ATIP to get the GCMS notes to see if there's some issues, if it's been referred for further review or whatever it might be. Then that's a warning sign. Oh, maybe there's something wrong with my application. Maybe I can quickly shore it up by correcting whatever issues they have before a decision is made. So we'll often go down that path. But at this stage, CAC are definitely priority for processing for immigration. So they've held the processing time still to 5 months, which was last updated just a month ago. So, okay. Afro B says, "Good morning." And Alicia, I think we've already answered this question, but do you expect the French language draws to continue this year, especially with the current political situation?
Well, I guess it remains to be seen what happens when Parliament is no longer prorogued, when they have government starting up again. We know that there's probably going to be a election that's coming up soon by October, if not before then, depending on non-confidence motions that might be brought forward. So if there's a change in government, then we'll have to see what happens with that change in government. But some of those French language provisions pertaining to immigration are in place because there's separate agreements between the federal government and Francophone, and the fact that we want to have Francophone heritage and culture as part of the Canadian makeup. And so some of those are legislated, and if they're going to roll back points for those things, they would have to make sure that they do a ministerial instruction change at very least, and in some cases there's a change in legislation. So in the short term, I think it's still worthwhile to try to learn French if you're working on that actively right now. Also because there is that new federal program for Francophone communities. And so that's another pathway that is more attainable for people if they can't hit those really high CRS scores on Express Entry. And the French levels are actually lower than what they are for targeted draws on Express Entry.
They are. And when it comes to trying to extend your permit here, the Francophone Mobility Work Permit Program only requires an NCLC 5. So even if your French language isn't quite at the level where you're getting those big bonus points, the 50 points under Express Entry, you still have the ability potentially to extend with an employer-specific work permit through the Francophone Mobility Program. Okay, VK says, "Is it possible to apply?" This is right back to the bridging one, Alicia. "Is it possible to apply for a bridging work permit as a backup if I'm on a closed work permit, so non-PNP, after express entry submission?" So once you submit your express entry application, almost instantaneously, within a couple minutes, you receive the acknowledgement of receipt letter, which basically provides instructions that you can use that letter to apply for a bridging open work permit. And so VK is asking, if I am on a closed work permit, and I'm going to hit this right here, VK, because once again, you're saying, what should I do? And Alicia and I will not provide legal advice through this avenue, but he says, what should I do? And he said, basically, so in case the PR is refused for any reason, the bridging open work permit is still valid. Is this a loophole? So, Alicia, what are your thoughts with individuals that are considering if they're already on an employer specific? And I don't get the sense that the closed work permit is expiring anytime soon. They're just applying for a bridge as a backup.
Mhm. And so, VK, it is theoretically possible to have two valid work permits, right? So there's nothing saying that you can't have two valid work permits, but um, I would caution in terms of, did you claim arranged employment points? And so did you get those 50 points for arranged employment? Because if you are considering switching employers and you claimed 50 points for arranged employment and you submitted that express entry application, and then you go around and you get a bridging open work permit, and if you were to change employers and no longer work for the employer who supported your application for PR under those 50 points, that could be an issue. Make sure that you look at your general eligibility for the bridging open and make sure you're still fitting general eligibility. But if your PR application is going to get refused, one of the requirements for a bridging open work permit is that you've submitted a PR application. It's passed first stage eligibility or the completeness check. If it gets refused, then you wouldn't be eligible for a bridging open work permit anyways.
Okay. All right, let's shift to a few more here. Meet Patel says, do I need to prove language proficiency for my postgrad extension as I got a shorter duration due to the passport expiring? So if someone is applying to extend and recapture the balance of time that they should have got on their first postgrad work permit, let's say it was 3 years, but maybe it was only issued to 2 years, 2 months because of the expiry of the passport, do they need to meet that language requirements? And Alicia is just pulling it up right now. Meet Patel, I have to assume, my friend, that your language is not an issue. In other words, it's not the case of you not being able to pass the exam. In every case, regardless of what Alicia pulls up here, I would I would encourage you 100% to provide proof of language proficiency. Write the test, have it in place. Do not leave it up to an officer to decide that, well, this is a new application and therefore the language policy applies. So I wouldn't leave it up to them. I wouldn't take the chance. If you have time, and you should still have time, go write the test and include it. That's my advice. And I would say that every single time. But I don't know if there's anything clearly or explicitly stated regarding this within the policy directives. I doubt it. I really do. The program delivery instructions, I doubt that they, are offering advice for officers, because it's so rare, really, that the people need to recapture. Well, what are your thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah, like the difficulty is that they changed the rules November 1st,
Mm-hmm.
2024, right? And
Yep.
so this is
Yep.
where, what kind of program did you graduate from and when was your first application submitted? Because they have rules that if you graduated from any other sort of university program, then you do have to provide your language test results. It's got to be at a CLB level 7. If you graduated from a college program or other non-university program, then you've got that language test requirement at a CLB 5. They don't specifically say, what if you're doing a recapture of time
No.
application after November 1st, 2024? But to be safe, I would say, if you're not sure, try to, and you did not do a master's or a PhD, and you're in the scenario where after November 2024, you do need to provide a language test result. I would err on the side of making sure you get your language test result and submitting that with your application. If you are in a university program, CLB 5. If you are in a non-university or a college program, CLB 7, and then the other one is CLB 5.
Yep. All right. AN says, hey, Mark and Alicia, in the PR application GCMS notes, it only shows 2 PCC details. However, I submitted 3. I verified it by downloading my submission package in comprehensive security. Anything to worry about? This is a situation where often what you're seeing doesn't fully and always reflect a comprehensive overview of what's happened. For example, sometimes when you're when you're uploading your documents into Express Entry, the client information section, it will often appear and disappear depending upon which glitched document checklist you have. I call it the smart and the stupid one. So the smart one actually lists your occupation. The stupid one lists a number. And so same thing goes for police clearance certificates, number one, number two. And so I don't know if that's what's happening here, but if you can see, if you know, and you can still access for express entry purposes, the list of documents that you've uploaded. So if it's there, I wouldn't stress over it. I wouldn't. I don't know, Alicia, if you have any other thoughts about this, but if you can see within the submission package, if it's a PR portal and you're downloading your package and you can see it within that versus express entry, you're going to be okay if you've properly uploaded it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if AN is saying that they're in a comprehensive security screening rather than a regular security screening, it could be that they're sending it to NHQ or they're doing additional security screening on that application. I know they've put out lists in terms of if you've been working in certain high-tech backgrounds or for certain universities in sensitive areas, then that's sometimes something that will get sent for comprehensive screening. Or if you have a name that is cross-referenced with a name of somebody who's on the list, on the red list, sometimes that happens as well. So there could be other reasons why they're in comprehensive security.
All right. Brian's come back with another question. So just to remind, he was asking about if the PCC isn't ready, what can you do before the ITA? And then the follow-up question is if Brian travels, so if someone travels to the US in person for digital fingerprints for the PCC, would that day in the US pose any issues for the PCC itself? Well, the only thing you take into consideration, Brian, is that when that PCC is issued, then it's going to be valid for 6 months. And theoretically, if you already have your ITA, it's not going to be an issue. So the only time we're really concerned is if you're submitting your EAPR and that police clearance certificate that you obtained when you were physically in that country, if it's older than 6 months, then that could result in an officer determining that that PCC has expired. But if it's within 6 months of issuance, then you're going to be okay. Anything to add to that, Alicia?
Yeah, because it seems like Brian was not living in the US, but
Yeah. So that's basically it. And obviously you would have had to at some point in time within the last 10 years been there, I'm assuming, Brian, which triggered the need in the first place. But if you're just trying to get it quick and you're going down there, then just that you just need to make sure that you submit your EAPR before that police clearance certificate expires, which would be 6 months if it was issued when you were there. All right. Okay, Alexa says, on a sad note, yes, we've heard so much of this. We see so much of this. I heard some people are now selling tier 0 and 1 jobs. Oh, please no. Well, understand, Alexa, that's fine. They can sell all they want. And as long as people are willing to pay, then those people willing to pay for those job offers, as far as I'm concerned, they should not be here in Canada because they are literally cheating other people out of opportunities for jobs. If it's a legitimate job, it's enriching employers that are corrupt or their agents or consultants or whoever is helping to facilitate this. It's creating corruption and disregard for the rule of law in our country, which is the foundation and bedrock of everything that is good about our country. But remember, those job offers any week now are going to be worth 0 points, like worthless for the purposes of express entry. And if that's the case, the underlying rationale for getting them is gone. And the reality is anyone who chooses to buy a tier 0 or 1 job, well, what is that going to do for them? Well, they have to lie about everything within their application and everything will be a fraud. And, I believe that the CBSA is going to start enforcing. There's going to be a lot more officers that are going to be looking more into this, doing site visits to check and see if the job actually exists and if the person actually works in the location. But securing an LMIA right from the get-go is going to be increasingly difficult for any employers because ESDC is now going to do a whole lot better job verifying that the actual offer is genuine. So
yeah. And when Mark says it's fine, he means it's highly illegal. So it's definitely
yeah,
not
sorry, I
fine for
didn't. Yeah,
anybody.
yeah, it's not fine.
But
Yeah, bad. What
yes,
I mean is it's
yeah,
a stupid decision,
yeah,
and if you choose to do that, well, you're going to be screwed doing that, let
yeah.
alone the illegality. Thanks, Alicia.
Well, and the and the other thing too is that officers are not going to buy that somebody has a tier 0 job unless they're senior managerial. There are
Yeah.
fewer senior managerial, like a 0 tier is very high level within a company. Even a tier 1, like those are usually occupations that require university. And if the officer goes back and takes a look at, the refusal to process list, and that company is not even eligible to apply for an LMIA, like that's going to help screen out a lot of these things right from the get-go too.
Yeah, it sure will. Okay. And then, of course, Byrne says, yes, I heard it too. Selling tier 0 and 1 jobs. Maybe people are not scared because the bad people are not punished. They just make noise and we suffer the consequence. Well, this is the world we're in, unfortunately. Um, Lorena has a question here, Alicia. Maybe well, like you've heard my thoughts on this. I've been very active on X and letting the minister know my thoughts on this. But what are your thoughts, Alicia, about the PNP reductions? And how
hmm
this will impact rounds and candidates.
hmm So, yeah, we do actually have the figures out. So we know for Alberta, they've got 4,875 nomination spots for 2025. So they've finally posted that. Um, Immigration is a federal matter. And so the reason that the provinces have allocations is because there's provincial federal agreements. And so they've literally had to negotiate a process between the provinces and the federal government to say, here's how we're going to have specific allocations. And there's always, yeah, so Mark's pulling up the AAIP website and you can see the numbers are now out. It's really tricky because if you take a look at the inventory, you will see that, we basically already have more people that are in the stream that have applications yet to be finalized than we have nomination spots if you look at the total. So that breaks it down by AOS, it breaks it down by express entry, rural renewal, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you take a look and you add up all these numbers, you know, we are basically at the nomination allocation. And the only good thing is that it's a rolling allocation. And so provinces keep looking at applications and then they will put that forward into the next year, depending on when they receive it. But it does mean that it is highly competitive for the provinces in order to get a PNP. So, for example, I've had consults with a number of Americans who look at the CRS scores. It's way too high to come in under a straight federal skilled worker if they don't have any Canadian experience and they don't have any French. So they're like, oh, well, can't I just apply for a PNP? Well, probably not, unless you actually have a connection to that province, unless you've studied there or have a family member there and probably have an employer there. It's going to be super, super hard to have a PNP nomination as your fallback. So I think basically what's going to happen is it's going to be more of a matter of express entry becoming an important part of what people are looking at in terms of eligibility, as well as spousal sponsorships and the new federal programs under rural and francophone communities.
All right. Well, we are just about at the end. Usually we've gone quite a ways past. Alicia, if you identify any that you want me to bring forward, let me know. We've got just a couple. I'll just give Anatoly a little shout. He says, tuning in from snowy Toronto too. Okay, we know it's a little bit colder in Toronto. And then we have Miller says, what are your predictions of CRS draws after the LMIA points removal? How low it can go? And that's the question lots of people are asking. Is it worth it, right? Is it worth continuing forward and hoping that we're going to get drawn under one of these rounds of invitations? And so if we go back, Alicia, and we look at this, so we can see how the scores are and how they've been, where they've been sitting here. In particular, what we're looking at traditionally is the Canadian experience class. So 542, 527, these are absolutely influenced by the extra 50 points for job offers for sure. But what do you think when the day comes where those points are gone? How much of a drop do you think is actually going to be triggered by the loss of those job offers? Because we don't know, we can't see from from the information on the website. Like if we look at sorry, if we go, I'm jumping around here, right here. Where was I looking here? I wanted to see score distribution. Yeah. So if, this is kind of where the scores are right now. And we know that people that are in the 500 to 600, at least in the lower part, some people are able to get that high with their 1 year of Canadian work experience or 2 years, which could amount to up to 50 with 2 years, right, of work experience in Canada, not to mention the skill transferability. So, we know that individuals that have masters, basically master's degree, 3 years of work experience, a CLB 9, they're 29 years or younger, about 469. So you add 50 points to that, you're in like the low, whatever, 520s, but usually you add in another 15 or something for Canadian education. So that kind of 520, 530 range is attainable without a job offer. But how many of those are there out there, and what do you
Mm.
think? So
Yeah. I'm guessing that it'll probably be like 520-ish when they take away those 50 points, and maybe like 515 or something. And then
mhm,
it'll only be once those applicants are cleared out of the pool that it'll get lower than that. And so Mark's right, it really depends how many of those 22,000 who are sitting in the pool above 500 CRS points, how many of them are relying on those 50 job offer points, because it might not be everybody. So my guess is it'll be in the, five teens, something like that.
yeah.
And then once those people get pulled out of the pool, then maybe, then maybe the lower 500s might have a chance.
Okay, last one, Nicholas squeezed in here. We'll actually go back to our main screen here. Okay, last question here we'll cover. So, um, hi, Mark and Alicia. Is there a problem if my spouse informs IRCC about leaving the country while waiting for the ECOPR? Any risk of losing PR? So, here's the issue, and it's always challenging, Nicholas. I'm going to ring this triangle, encourage you guys to book a consult, because we are not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Leaving the country, even in the best of circumstances, carries with it risk. But what you're asking here is before the ECOPR, which means that in order to land, you have to be in Canada, and anything can happen. And at times, people will receive a notification to set up their landing portal, and they're not in the country. But that specifically is not acceptable. You can't be outside the country, living outside or otherwise. And so I don't know. We don't know how long she's going to be gone, or whether she's going to be permanently out, or what the issue is. But Alicia, can you pull out any general advice that you can give people in these circumstances? This is not legal advice for you, Nicholas. We recommend, once again, you book a consult. We can talk about it, but we're trying to get something out of everything here.
Yeah, so general legal information is, if you have finalized your landing from inside Canada and you truly and legitimately said, yes, I was in Canada when you did your ECOPR portal from inside Canada, then okay, you properly said, yes, I was in Canada at the time. But then if you leave Canada, or if your spouse leaves Canada, the tricky thing is, what is your country of nationality? What is your passport validity? And are you visa required in your passport? Because you're kind of in this strange no man's land between being a Canadian permanent resident and not. And the trigger for when you become a Canadian permanent resident is when you get that signed ECOPR back. And you're not a PR until that point. So if your spouse leaves and tries to come back into Canada, they would need to have a valid visa if they're from a visa required country. And then they would need to tell immigration about the change in address and probably explain what happened. And the risk is that it's going to mess up the landing process, because there's a different landing process if you are not physically inside Canada.
Yeah.
And that might delay things quite a bit.
Mhm. All right. Well, we will wrap up that for today. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. As always, this live stream that we do is all sponsored by the Canadian Immigration Institute, and in particular, our DIY courses. The one course that is our flagship is the Express Entry Accelerator. This is a complete comprehensive how to file your own Express Entry application, plus a masterclass with me that happens every other week, Wednesdays from 4 to 5, sometimes a little bit longer PM, Mountain Time every other week. So when you subscribe to the course, which is super comprehensive, there's over 10 hours of video content, lessons directing you, guiding you, helping you to avoid all the pitfalls that we have consults with people often when it's too late and they've already made the mistake. And never before, you guys, has it ever been a time where you don't get a second chance. And that's the world that we're in right now. So this is designed to help people who are looking to file their own application and they're looking for support. They're looking for instructions, detailed instructions, tutorials. There's sample documents. We even have a custom GPT that Igor and I have created to help build reference letters and select knock codes and things like that. It's all within the course, and you can subscribe just by clicking on Learn Here. But we also have our TRV course, which also is embedded with a nice little custom GPT to help you when you're building out your invitation letters and things like that. And we strongly encourage you to take a look at both of those if applicable. Also, this source of content is not just the Canadian immigration. We have, I'll just jump back here to our main channel here. The Canadian Immigration Institute is full of videos. So we have almost, Alicia, we're getting close to 1,000 videos. It's hard to believe, 964 videos, but make sure you subscribe to our channel and share it with anyone that you know is looking for information and guidance. Remember, our Time's Up series is just all designed to help all of you guys that are in the situation you are right now. And if we go back to our website, Holthe Immigration Law, it's holthelaw.com. Just lose the immigration, holthelaw.com. And here you can learn all about how we work with our clients. So yes, Alicia and I are hired by people all the time to work with them. The difference, you guys, is that we don't take over your application and have you fill in a use of representative form and be the point of contact between you and immigration. We don't do that. Instead, we allow you to maintain control over your own application, but we provide direct lawyer to client collaboration. So there's no assistants, no paralegals, no one between us. It's you and us. And we help you prepare, review, edit, finalize, and submit your application together with you. And then we give you a letter from us, an advice for consideration letter that tells immigration who Alicia and I are, that we were paid to assist you, and that we are authorized to provide legal advice for a fee, all of our Law Society stuff, because we're both immigration lawyers, and Igor as well. And like, we are currently helping just tons and tons of people make sure that their application is done right. And so that's kind of what we want to point out. When you go to blog and resources on our website, tons of information on the blog, including Alicia's one on bridging open work permits. The podcast episode will be released hopefully today or tomorrow. And then, speaking of podcast, if you haven't subscribed, go to our podcast. You can search on Apple or Spotify and absolutely go through and listen to all of the episodes, starting especially at episode 149, which is where our Time's Up series started on what to do when your work permit is expiring. Okay. All right. We've covered a bunch of ground here, but all of the links are in the description below to the DIY courses, to the to booking a consult with us, everything. And we're just happy here to try to help you guys navigate through this crazy, crazy world that we call Canadian immigration. All right. See you guys later. Thanks, Alicia.
Thanks, everybody.